haven't noticed, Astro Yao is on the horizon, Wuthering Waves 2.0 is absolutely fantastic, and in general, gacha games are thriving. I actually have something way more insane to confess. I've become wildly obsessed with the new game. And it's not even released yet. But it's true, I am absolutely infatuated, shocked, and spending over 16 hours a day playing Arknights Endfield. Before you ask, no, this isn't sponsored. Though yes, I did just beat the entirety of the beta while on less than 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night. Today though, I'll be breaking down everything you need to know about Arknights Endfield. However, before anything else, I do want to tell you guys that I aim to give you a real, honest, gacha addict biased take of everything that I've learned and experienced while actually having completed everything that the beta has to offer. Without further ado, let's get into it. To begin with, we need to actually talk about the game, the systems, the story, everything you would care to know about when it comes to Arknights. First, let's talk about the visuals. The UI of Arknights is out of this world, very crisp, very responsive, and extremely high quality, especially given that Arknights 1.0 certainly gave inspiration to a lot of sci-fi themes and menus in the gacha space as a whole. The game itself is also amazingly gorgeous, though at this point, most people have come to realize that graphics and 3D models that kind of look like this almost come standard in the industry because of game engines like Unreal Engine or Unity being popular. That being said, things like the combat special effects are also neat yet satisfying. The transitions between combat in cutscenes and the stunning environments that you traverse through while exploring all are very pleasing and make a great experience. And before you mention it as well, no, I didn't forget about them. I also really like the way that the characters look. Now, of course, things like appreciating characters without being able to play or test them makes things a bit more difficult and definitely more subjective, but sincerely, the characters all look fantastic while each also has their own identity or unique theme that really glues their design together. Now, I know what you're thinking though. Even if everything in the game looks spectacular though, Kana, who cares? The most important aspect of a game is how enjoyable it actually is. After all, games are meant for relaxation, having fun, or enjoying yourself, right? Well, guys, I hate to break it to you, this game broke every single expectation I had going into the beta. To begin with, I believed Arknights Endfield to have taken more inspiration from Genshin or share the common action combat theme that other games in the gacha scene have used recently. And while the game does have action combat in it, this is such a misrepresentation of the game as a whole. Yes, you will certainly fight frequently in Arknights Endfield, but no, that is definitely not what you spend every moment in the game doing. Instead, we now need to take a moment to address base building. This is an absolutely essential part of Arknights Endfield, and while it can be confusing at times, anyone who has ever played Satisfactory, Factorio, or any base building automation / exploration related game will definitely be excited. The main reason base building is so important is because it powers up your characters in the same way that you'd otherwise expect something like relics, disk drives, or echoes to give your characters stats. This makes the system feel like a critical part of Enfield's gameplay loop, and it also means that anytime you're improving your factory or your overall base, you're simultaneously improving your character's strength too. To be clear, what I'm describing right now is a completely free-to-play, no RNG system that gives your character stats, and it isn't even a small or insignificant amount either. Some of the equipment that you unlock and gain access to by leveling up your base have some of the most ridiculous effects I've ever seen, and that's not all. Another amazing and satisfyingly designed aspect of the base building in Arknights is how the base actually contributes to your overall character progression and world. What I mean by this is that having more recipes unlocked in your base or unlocking new levels also gives you access to new mechanics that allow you to explore the world differently or even better. This includes things like explosives or even consumables that you can use in combat to keep yourself healthy. Now, again, if you're someone who enjoys base building or automation in general, you're in luck. Endfield has a lot of that, and there are plenty of buildings or products that need optimizing, exploring, or discovering so that you can make gear faster or more efficiently. This isn't the only thing you'll need to make, however, as the game also allows you to have multiple sub-bases with NPCs and allies that need resources themselves to improve their own areas, which unlocks new features. So in short, the way that base building has been designed gives something to both base building enjoyers, but also character building or action combat focused players too. Now thus far, I've avoided talking too much about combat because I have a whole section dedicated for it right now, so let's actually dive deep into combat as a whole. Arknights Endfield plays like a mix between Xenoblade Chronicles and basically any action combat game that you'd like to think of. You could say it's similar to Wuthering Waves with some of the dodging or attacks, or you could even say it's similar to Genshin given how reliant the game is on elements, but here's what I found as someone who has built roughly 4 to 6 units to or near max investment. Unlike in Zenless Zone Zero or Wuthering Waves, elements play a significant role in direct combat, since mixing elements together for reactions in direct combat is very useful. This means that although in something like Zenless Zone Zero or Wuthering Waves, you may find bonus damage from taking a fire character against a cryo unit, this is not really the case or focus of Enfield's combat as a whole. In some cases, activating elemental reactions is how you enable your character to use special abilities or skills, and because of this, the damage, the usefulness, and the utility of elements being applied properly should not be overlooked or underestimated. Regarding other combat systems, knockdown and crowd control abilities that stop enemies from moving are extremely valuable too, but this is actually because of dodging. On that note, let's talk about dodging, because this is a mechanic that will take some getting used to. Unlike other action combat games where dodging is often used to take risks and maximize damage, all while just staying out of danger, it's handled much different here. The window to perform a successful dodge is much shorter, but more than anything else, many of the abilities or attacks in Arknights Endfield will punish you or feel worse when trying to weave dodges with them. And this isn't even factoring in attack frequency from enemies. To illustrate one example specifically though, let's talk about battle skills. Giving context quickly, battle skills are abilities performable by any character, similar to resonance skills or EX special abilities in other gacha games. But to put simply, it costs one resource bar to activate one of these skills. However, with the way that dodging and attack patterns from enemies work, this will sometimes cause you to need to perform a dodge as you are also casting a battle skill. The reason this is an issue is because as of now, this will actually use up and not refund the resource that you used as a result of you having to interrupt or dodge your ability, and this can just feel very uncomfortable or unsatisfying at times. In addition to this, performing multiple dodges in a row feels very clunky since there's actually a delay in between each performable dodge, and this also isn't factoring in the stamina system, which you'll also have to consider so you don't run out of the ability to dodge at all. Now, despite what I've described, none of this is nearly as disorienting as the fact that your battle skill and ultimates are not guaranteed to have invincibility frames. This means that if an enemy can swing at you and deal knockback or massive damage, you'll have to either disengage and run away entirely, or you'll have to use a dodge and pray that you aren't forced to use a multi-dodge and get hit in the process. Moving away from dodges though, let's actually talk about specifics regarding characters and some encounters. Gilberta, as of now, is a 6-star character that is given for free after 3 days of playing the game, and let me tell you, this character is very, very strong. If a wind character that vacuums and crowd controls enemies together while also being very powerful at the start of a game's release sounds very familiar, well, you're in luck. Yes, she's basically Venti, but this time you're guaranteed to get her. Lavatine is another 6-star character, but also one of the first limiteds that is currently pullable as of now. I definitely noticed that, especially compared to other DPS, her damage was off the charts, and she also destroyed everything easily, especially early on. Now, finally, I do want to comment on a few of the bosses and enemies that I fought, as there were a few of note, but I won't go too far in detail since some of them are spoilers. That being said, there were a number of bosses that had designs in the way that Wuthering Waves bosses have mechanics to look out for, and this includes things like dive bombs, meteors raining from the sky, and multi-phase fights. To be honest though, a lot of these fights felt a bit less comfortable since the more restrictive dodge system in place caused movement to feel more limited or clunky, but they were still definitely manageable. Overall though, the combat definitely felt much better once I got higher level, as new sets, levels in my characters, and general investments in damage led me to experience content that was difficult, but simultaneously rewarding as well. However, as a final side note and just a gripe of mine, there is this one flamethrower character who you end up fighting a lot as it's something that you farm for character materials, but that character is super annoying to fight since, again, you don't have any invincibility frames to land your abilities against him in most cases, and unless you use a cryo or ranged character to deal with him, he just stands there freaking out and you have to wait for him to calm down before you can start hitting him again. Now, next, I wanted to talk about the more broad systems that are in the game that I felt were actually worth talking about. Gear and weapons are well themed with plenty of interesting passives or designs that feel catered specifically for a special character or gameplay concept in mind. Now, although this is the case, that doesn't mean that you can't experiment with or test out new combinations, as this definitely feels like something that is rewarded or actually incentivized, as you don't actually need 4 of your 4 total equipment slots being the same set, and rather you only need 3. There were also small things that gave the game personality, and this included things like puzzles always being in the form form of shapes or special identifiable icons like hearts or symmetrical shapes. We were also introduced to things like drastically different exploration routes after you completed a challenge that would then open up and make exploration easier for you. And truthfully, there were so many other instances like this in the game that really made it feel like the developers cared about the game that they were designing. Now, leveling up the world also felt even more rewarding compared to other experiences I've had, since it not only increased the level and drops from enemies, it also gave more ore while providing an increase to the special rare limited materials scattered across the map. This increase in resources across the board not only increased the speed at which you could make new gear, but also acted as a way for you to gain additional materials that you would need for things like upgrading your characters or promoting your weapons. The final comment I'd like to mention about Endfield systems is that constellations or multiple copies of characters can be strong, but it's not necessarily for the reason that you're thinking of. Although the expected reward for having multiple of the same character is a significant damage increase, for instance, I found that one of the most valuable aspects of certain characters' additional copies was actually unlocking additional resource generation or reduced cost to cast their ultimates. The best value I found by unlocking constellations or getting multiple copies of the characters was actually the more fluid and smooth gameplay loop that it provided. This is because the added effect of things like bonus SP or reduced ultimate cost kept combat much more active and prevented me from having to wait around endlessly for my cooldowns or my ultimate energy to regenerate. And now the final system I want to talk about is actually in regard to the gacha system. This is an extremely hotly debated topic, so let me explain this clearly. A single character pull in this game costs 500 premium currency, and with it, a 10 pull therefore costs 5,000. A 6-star character has a 0.8% chance of appearing while pulling, and by contrast, there is an 8% chance to receive a 5-star. Every 10 pulls, you are guaranteed to receive a 5-star, but at 80 pulls, you are actually guaranteed a 6-star, though there is a 50-50 chance of you receiving a different 6-star than the one listed on the limited rate up banner. At this point, everything is similar to or familiar enough to other systems in the general gacha / new age Hoyoverse gacha landscape, but where things change is what happens if you actually lose this initial 80 pull 50-50. Upon this happening, two things go into effect. First, the necessary pulls to guarantee the character is reduced from 80 to 40, and second, once hitting the additional 40 pity or in total 120 pulls, you are guaranteed to receive the limited 6-star character whose banner you selected. Now, the reason why things are controversial, especially with the character banner, is because of the following. Pulls on this banner do not carry over to the next, and despite being guaranteed the limited rate up banner for the first time when you pull, any subsequent dupes or additional pulls on this banner are a 50-50 permanently and do not guarantee you the character as it did before. Being truthful, I understand the outrage and anger behind a system like this, but from pulling and playing through the game with its current premium currency economy, I have some thoughts. First, I do want to say that the constellations for characters can be significant at times, but they are certainly not insane enough to justify needing or even requiring multiple copies of a character. Additionally, if you aren't someone who would be pulling for multiple copies of a character, you actually can save upwards of 40 or 60 whole pulls depending on what game you compare it to, with games like Genshin or Zenless Zone Zero having a 180 guaranteed pity, with a game like Wuthering Waves, as far as I could tell, actually requiring 160. Therefore, this can then be amazing since technically the pity to receive a guaranteed would then be 120 instead of, well, 160 or 180. Now, ultimately, what I think will really matter in regards to all of this is how they actually treat the pull economy and how many resources you get premium currency wise, alongside how they decide to treat the constellation system upon release and in the future. As it stands, we have plenty of pulls and resources to obtain characters and weapons in the game, but who knows? Things can change from beta to launch. The final section that I wanted to talk about will be short since I would rather players experience the story for themselves, but something I'd like to inform you guys about specifically is the story in concept and execution. To start, the protagonist does talk, but as per Arknights tradition, we are a faceless, masked character who is now the hero of the game. Spoiler free, I will also mention that the story itself felt decent, great, and even excellent during some parts, but I will admit that the long stretches and mix-ups of me having to fight, then explore, and then build my base did at times take away from my overall immersion of the story to pay attention to exactly what was going on. Interestingly, the game also has a skip and summary of dialogue dialogue feature currently available in the beta, but in general, I felt that the story was well paced, didn't feel too obnoxious or unrealistic at all, and I did also enjoy the varied voice acting between characters, zones, and different NPCs. That's going to be it for today's video though, guys. As I'm sure you could tell, I've disappeared a little while, and this is literally what I've been doing for, at this point, 100 hours or so. To be honest, I do think that Arknights may not be for everyone, as I do think that the complexity of maybe base building and factory building may kind of de-incentivize certain people from trying or committing to the game. But for me personally, as someone that has put hundreds of hours in both Satisfactory and Factorio, I'm a big fan and I've really enjoyed my time. As always though, guys, if you enjoyed today's content, thank you, and I hope you learned or at least appreciated some part of today's video. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you could like, comment, turn on the notification bell, and subscribe. Otherwise, if you'd like to watch any of my other content, feel free to check out the rest of my socials. Thank you again for watching, everyone. I appreciate all the support that you guys have been giving me. I'll see you all in the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy, everyone. Good night.